Hello and welcome to the Isles Nation podcast. I'm Pete Truskowski, also known as NY Isles Nation, and we're joined today by a special guest, Tim Pigulski of 710 ESPN Seattle, who covers the Seattle Thunderbirds, the junior team of Islanders top prospect Matt Barzal, and also with us is Alex Tesler. How are you guys doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Very well, Pete. Thanks a lot.
So we'll get right into it. Obviously, we brought Tim on to talk about Matt Barzal. So let's start it off with his season right now. The Seattle Thunderbirds are 9-1 in their last 10 games. And I believe you said Matt Barzal has 20 points in those 10 games and 25 and 11, if that's correct. So basically, what I wanted to know is Matt Barzal carrying the Seattle team through this hot stretch right now? Is he basically the Seattle Thunderbirds?
Yeah, it's been a really hot stretch for Barzell. You're right, 25 in the past 11 games, and that started off with a loss. That first of 11 games started off with a loss to Kelowna, where Barzell he had 2 points. It was a 7-4 loss, but he's actually a -4. And then I think Seattle really kind of started on the upswing after that. They beat Kelowna right after that, and Barzell had a hat trick. And then it's been pretty much uphill for him, capped off by his most recent game this past Tuesday, where he had a hat trick and a couple of assists, 5 points. Is he carrying the team during that stretch? He's definitely a big part of it. He's with 25 points in 11 games, it'd be hard to argue against anybody being kind of the main reason for that. He's leading the team during that time. But to say he's doing it alone, that's tough. He's certainly a catalyst. But Seattle has been getting scoring up and down their lineup. You've been seeing a lot more secondary scoring. A lot of the guys that you probably haven't heard of. A lot of guys who aren't drafted, they're certainly contributing to. But that top line, Matt Barzal, and his buddy Ryan Gropp, the Rangers draft pick, they're definitely the two. They're standing out during this stretch, and during when teams are playing well, their best players are playing well, but they're also getting contributions up and down, and I think that the same can be said for Seattle in this situation over the past few weeks.
Adding on to that, about players like Ryan Gropp and Keegan Kolesar, who are both his line mates and players he plays with on power play. What kind of player do you think he really needs to succeed? Can he really drive a line, or is he the kind of player who really thrives off having someone like a sniper and a power forward with him, or perhaps a fellow playmaker? What are the kind of combinations that you think would best help him succeed in the NHL and for the rest of the season for the Thunderbirds?
That's a good question, and one thing you'll notice if you get to watch the Thunderbirds, Barzal double shifts a lot. You mentioned how he's been on a line with Gropp and Kolesar for most of the year, and that's true. Actually, during this hot streak, they've kind of bounced around a little bit. So one player who's traditionally played center, he was on the U.S. World Junior team, Scott Enzer. He's actually bumped up for a portion of that to play on Barzal's right wing as they move Kolesar around. And Seattle, before this streak, has had some trouble with consistency throughout the year, and so there's been a lot of line shuffling. For the majority of that, yeah, he has played with Gropp and Kolesar, Gropp being more of a sniper, Kolesar, your traditional power forward. But during this stretch, when Barzal's been scoring these points, he's also been centering the team's third or fourth line. So he's actually been playing with some of those guys, again, whose names you may not be familiar with. He's the kind of guy, certainly, that will carry a line. He's got that talent. He's one of the most talented players in the WHL. That can't really be argued. And when you see him on the ice, other teams, I mean, it's pretty amazing, especially watching him hold the puck on the power play, watching how the other team kind of will gravitate towards him in one sense, but at the same time, they're all scared to kind of bite and make that move, because as soon as they do and they drop off whatever their assignment is, he's going to find that player. So he's certainly a playmaker, but as you can see, if you look at his stats this year, he's already set a substantial career high in goals. He's got 25 in 51 games. His previous career high was 14. So he's adding that aspect to his game as well. He's become much more of a shooter, which I think was the worry about him. But he's able to carry a line for sure. I think that's where he excels. he's an extremely talented player, extremely smart too, and I think he knows that. As far as the kind of guys he'll succeed with, he is a playmaker first and foremost. I think that'll always be the kind of the focal point of his game. Having a power forward on one side and a sniper on the other gives him multiple ways to kind of set the play up, though. So if I had to say the type of players that he'll excel with most, it would certainly be that kind of line in the NHL.
All right, and you brought up Ryan Grapp, who was the Rangers draft pick in the second round of this past year's draft. And Barzal has 82 points this season in 51 games, leading the Thunderbirds. And Grapp is second on the team with 66 points in 60 games. I'm pretty much going to ask you right now to fluff our feathers and tell us that the only reason that Ryan Grapp's point totals are so high is because he plays with Matt Barzal. Is that true? Do you think that Barzal absolutely makes Grapp look like twice the player he actually is?
Twice the player, that might be a bit of an exaggeration. He certainly helps. I'll say that much. They're, again, like the kind of players that complement each other really well, right? Grapp is a sniper. Grapp has one of the quickest releases and hardest shots that you'll see in the WHL again, and I may sound biased, saying these guys are at the top of the league in their sort of respective attributes, but Grapp has a great shot. Just the other night, he lasered a wrister. You may have heard of Carter Hart, goalie in Everett, total stud. He's 17, is eligible for the draft this year, and Grapp lasered a shot that kind of hit Hart in the chest, and it took a weird angle, kind of angled upwards into his chin or neck or collarbone or something in there, and he was shaken up and actually had to leave the game for a little bit. Fortunately, he came back, but Grapp's got a cannon of a shot. Having Barzal on his wing, or I'm sorry, not on his wing, as a center, is very helpful for a guy like Grapp because you don't necessarily see Grapp as the kind of player who is going to carry the puck through the neutral zone, skate it around a lot in the offensive zone in the same way that Barzal could. Barzal's best attributes are his vision, his passing ability. For Grapp, it's certainly his shot, and so the two work together really well. We've seen at times when Barzal has been missing, particularly last year during the draft year. When Barzal was injured, Grapp was the focal point of the offense, and he was certainly a big part of it there. So he's got, he's certainly got his own type of game. The two work together really well. To answer your question, yes, Grapp's numbers are certainly helped by Barzal, but he was a second round pick for a reason, and he's a good player in his own right.
Well, speaking of other draft picks, it was kind of surprising last year when the Islanders did take Barzal at 16. Obviously, Garth Snow traded Griffin Reinhart for a package of picks, including the 16th overall from the Edmonton Oilers. Very glad that pick didn't go for Cam Talbot. I probably would have cried myself to sleep that night. So in that regard, there was a lot of talk that his stock dropped because of an injury that he received in his draft year and because of his shot and his reluctance to shoot. We already have a player on the Islanders that has a reluctance to shoot. His name is Josh Bailey, so that kind of scared a couple Islander fans. Mm-hmm. More notable is the fact that the Boston Bruins had 3 draft picks before, the 13th, 14th, and the 15th pick, and they picked, and I'm probably butchering these names, Jacob Zaboral, Jake DeBrusk, and Zachary Senyshyn. You could argue about Zaboral, but DeBrusk and Senyshyn don't really seem like they're the kind of players who would go above a player of dynamic talent such as Barzal. So is there any reason for Islander fans to worry, 1, about the injury, and 2, just generally why his stock dropped in the draft last year?
I think it's exactly what you said. It was the injury and a reluctance to shoot. Those were the 2 biggest knocks on Barzal, and even with that reluctance to shoot, we all knew coming in when he came into the WHL that he was a playmaker first and foremost. And I actually had the pleasure of going to the draft last year, so I got to talk to Barzal within minutes of him getting picked at 16. And you go back to the draft, and you were hearing potentially as high as number 5, which is where Carolina took Noah Hannafin. I don't think they expected him to make it to number 5. And then as soon as one player drops, there's that sort of cascading effect, right? And so at number 9, I thought that there was a pretty good chance Barzal would get picked. I think that was San Jose, if I remember right. I'm remembering the names better than I'm remembering the numbers better than I'm actually remembering the teams. But then after he got passed up there, then Dallas picked, I think it was number 10, And then I think it was 12, 13, 14 where Boston picked. And I mean, it was I was shocked when they didn't use one of those picks on him. Even going into the draft, after the injury, after all that stuff, um, the consensus was still that Barzal was the top pick, or I'm sorry, the top player in from the WHL eligible in the draft. A couple guys from the Dub got taken over him. Provorov, who's a defenseman, so you can see if a team needs that more, then they're going to go for that, and he's a good player. And DeBrusk is a good player too, but to take another forward over Barzal was shocking. Another WHL forward over him was pretty astonishing. And so I had the chance. I asked him afterward if he was shocked that he fell to number 16, and he was pretty candid and honest, and he said, yeah, there was no way he expected Boston to pass on him. As far as whether or not that's something to worry about, the injury isn't affecting him at all. He's put together his best season. He's continued to improve, and even as the season's gone on, we've seen marked improvement in his game. So the knee, it was a pretty freak injury. I guess he was just horsing around in the locker room as 17-year-olds do with a couple of guys, and as I understand, he tripped and then cracked the kneecap, and that kept him out for a pretty good amount of time. So it's kind of a freak injury, nothing that would really sort of linger, like if you once you tear an ACL or something, and that kind of is something that lingers for the rest of your career. It's nothing like that. So he's come back. He's continued to improve and be a better player. And as far as the shot goes, as I mentioned earlier, career high in goals this year. I actually had the chance to talk to him earlier this week after a game, and I can't remember. I don't think it was the game against Tri-City. I think it was the game against Everett. But when he had 2 goals, and that was on the 27th. But I asked him, there was a situation where he was going in on a 2-on-1, and normally a playmaker, as the defenseman converges towards him, he's going to make that pass, 10 out of 10 times. But Barzal this year, he's evolved, and you've seen that in his game where he is able to react and process and think the situation through much quicker. The defenseman bit on him, kind of went down. Barzal pulled the puck back and immediately shot. And I asked him if he was looking past the whole time, and he said, no, the whole time I was looking shoot. He said that, earlier in his career, he certainly would have passed in that situation, but now he considers himself just as much of a shooter as a playmaker. And so it's an area that he's focused on. Obviously, the Islanders are telling him that that's something he needs to work on, but he's somebody who is very good. I think he understands those areas of his game. When he came in as a 16-year-old, his defensive play was lacking. That's not something that really flies on the Thunderbirds with a former hard-nosed NHLer and Steve Konowalchuk is their coach. So that got fixed up pretty quickly. He's become a much better defensive player. And then as he's gotten more playing time, the shot became the concern. So he started shooting more. And we've seen for him, it's that he does a great job of working on those things that people perceive as lacking. And to kind of go back to his draft and where he's picked at number 16, and I've mentioned this before in a couple other places, but when Barzal was 15 and he was this incredibly hyped prospect, the top kid in BC, all that stuff, he was actually being mentioned in the same breath as Connor McDavid. And we all know what McDavid is and what he means. And I asked Barzal when he came back from injury last year and was starting to kind of get his legs back under him, and we were starting to talk about the draft and stuff like that. Is it tough for you to have to see all the hype surrounding McDavid and Eichel and these guys when a year and a half ago you were thought of in the same sentence, in the same class? And he said, yeah, it is something that bothers me. And so I think he's got that chip on his shoulder too, that number 16 pick, at one point being considered among the elite of the class, which number 16 doesn't necessarily reflect that. But he said, yeah, that's something. Honestly, it sucks. He said, I remember very specifically him using that word, and he was pretty upset with how much the injury set him back. But based on the game you've seen this year, or his play this year, and what you saw at the end of last year, he's used that as inspiration to become an even better player and kind of prove people wrong. There's certainly nothing wrong with being taken at 16 overall, but for somebody of his caliber and his skill level, top 10, top 5 should kind of is where he feels he should have been.
And the Islanders, when they did trade up last year, there was a lot of speculation that the reason they traded for the pick was to get something for Griffin Reinhart, who many speculated would be a bust. But Garth Snow and Trent Collette dismissed that theory, and they basically said, no, the reason we made this trade was because we couldn't believe that Matt Barzal was still there at 16. And ever since then, it feels like the Islanders brass has been in love with this kid. He was the last cut in camp this year. He lasted longer than Dal Cole and Hosang for alarm clock reasons, but nonetheless, he was the last cut in camp. So, do you think there's a real chance that Barzal could make this team next year? And is the love affair between Barzal and the Islanders two-sided?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think Barzal is he's very happy with where he's picked. I think it's pretty cool for him. He's going to have the opportunity to be in the big city. He likes the fact that the Islanders, when they traded up to get him, that shows a lot that the team was willing to invest in him, and especially with a player like Griffin Reinhart, who also played in the WHL, was also very, very well regarded. In 2013-14, they actually were both in the WHL simultaneously, so they had some time there together. That I think was very flattering to Barzal, and I think that that's something he wants to, again, he has that chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove the Islanders right for trading up to pick him. I think it's somewhere that he certainly does want to be, and as you said, I think that the love affair is mutual there, and that he was the last cut in camp, which may not have been expected with a couple of other high picks. Dal Cole, I think he picked number 5 the year before or something like that.
Yeah.
He was picked pretty highly, so it was surprising to see Barzal outlast him there. I think it's somewhere that he really wants to be, and somewhere that he's pretty invested in. He was very flattered by the fact that they traded up to take him, because, as you said, they never would have expected him to actually be there at 16.
A lot of us obviously were watching the WJCs this year, and Canada, unfortunately for them, had a very early exit, but Barzal seemed to be the most notable player there. There were some disappointments there, such as Jake Virtanen, but everyone really seemed to be talking about Barzal. There's obviously a chance that he could go back again next year for the 2017 WJCs. I believe he'd be still young enough. What do you think was the most standout part of his performance during the WJCs? And if he does go back, could he be the real leader of that team on the next run?
Yeah. I mean, if he does go back, then I think that he's easily slotted in. He'll be 19 next year, so he'll be eligible. So I think if he does end up going back, that he will be one of the focal points of their offense. Canada's stacked every year from a talent perspective. So, but I think he'll be one of the main focuses next year. I thought that he was, Canada overall was a disappointment, and I think that the players on that team would be the first to tell you that they were disappointed with how it ended. But he did look good, and obviously I live here in Seattle. I'm more invested in Team USA's affairs than I am in Team Canada's. But I do have a couple friends up north who I had the chance to talk to, and they said the same thing that you did. That he was 18. I don't think he was really expected to be that top guy, but people saw him, and he really stood out as one of the best players on Team Canada, and sort of a bright spot during what ended up being a pretty dark year. So if he does go back next year, and that's going to be probably dependent on the Islanders and whatever his status is, I'm sure if he's back with Seattle, that he's almost a lock here in March of 2016 to make Team Canada as a 19-year-old for 2017. I don't think there's even a question about that as long as he's healthy.
A thing with the Islanders that they seem to look for is the fact that a lot of their drafted players and young players are drafted as centers, but then a lot of them move to the wing. For example, you have John Tavares, who's the number 1 center, obviously, but then you have guys like Ryan Strome, Brock Nelson, Mikhail Grabowski, Josh Bailey. All these guys are centers, but they play wing on the Islanders for the most part, with Franz Nielsen as a second-line center. So do you think Barzal's game would translate to the wing? Because I'm salivating at the thought of a Barzal-Tavares duo on the top line. Do you think that is something that we could look towards?
It's tough to say. I don't want to say anything that I certainly don't want to say he couldn't play wing or something. I'm sure that he could. That's not something we ever see him doing really. But I think that Barzal first and foremost is a center. That's his game. He likes to roam. He likes to float. He likes to be the guy in the middle of the ice. He likes to have that extra space and that extra freedom. Getting the puck up through the neutral zone. He's the guy who is always leading the T-Birds rush. He's the guy who they get the puck on his stick in the defensive zone in the power play and let him kind of figure it out. And 90% of the time the puck ends up on his stick in the offensive zone too. So could he play wing? Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. In Seattle, we've seen him exclusively play center. I'm sure he has that ability. He has the offensive acumen to pick things up really quickly and to adjust to whatever you would need him to play. But I think first and foremost for him, he spent his whole life playing center, and that's where all of his experience has been. So I would expect that that's ultimately where he would translate to in the NHL.
So I have one last question for you before we wrap things up. This is a bit random. Are there any other Islanders prospects that you think are notable around the league? I mean, that Michael Del Cole just got traded from the Oshawa Generals to the Kingston Frontenacs, and Parker Wotherspoon is also playing for Tri-City, which is also in the WHL.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other Islander prospects you've seen that you think are notable, or do you really exclusively stick with the Thunderbirds?
I mostly pay attention to the Thunderbirds. I have noticed every once in a while I'll get to see a couple of those guys come through, particularly the WHLers. So the other night when the T-Birds won 7-2 and Barzal had that big 5-point game, Parker Wotherspoon was actually on the defensive end there. He had a pretty impressive goal himself. It gets lost in the Seattle's offensive theatrics, but Wotherspoon for Tri-City, he had a nice goal. I mean, he's a defenseman, so you don't expect him to do a lot of that stuff, a lot of the kind of end-to-end rushes, but he had a really nice play where he carried the puck into the offensive zone, split two defensemen, and then was able to get a quick shot up off over a 6'7" goalie's shoulder. So he's a good player. He showed some offensive ability, and his brother was a very good player in Portland. So he's somebody I get to watch. I know that you guys have Ryan Pulak in your system too, and we got to see him when he played for Brandon, another really good two-way defenseman that you guys should be excited about. Del Cole, I don't really get to watch him much, but based on the numbers that I'm seeing, obviously the trade for him has worked out very well. Sometimes that changes scenery is all you need. And I know Barzal and him roomed together during training camp, and Barzal came back and had really great things to say about Del Cole, and particularly his Memorial Cup experience and how the other players and fans and the people who are really invested in the hockey world, knowing that Del Cole won a Memorial Cup, that he just was treated differently. And so I think here in the States, people don't pay as much attention to the Memorial Cup, but those in tight with the hockey circles, they do, and it actually means a lot. So obviously a lot of reasons to be excited about him, but I'd say you guys have a pretty deep group of players here, and a pretty exciting future for the Islanders.
Yeah, I sure hope so. And I have one final question for you, and it's from our fellow writer, Carrie Haber. It's about Barzal's neutral zone play and how he plays away from the puck. I know a lot of skilled forwards in juniors and before they get to the NHL. I know Islanders coach Jack Capuano, it's the main thing he says, is that these guys got to learn how to play away from the puck. Is that a concern at all for Barzal, or is he good in the neutral zone and responsible both ways?
It's been an area that he's improved a lot, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Something that from 16 to 18 is light years different. Certainly still places to improve, but he's gotten much better at kind of sticking with his man, shadowing his man. His back checking has gotten very good, which to the point that I would say it's gotten much better, to the point where I would actually say it's very good by WHL standards. Obviously that's different than the NHL, but he's shown the progression and the ability to continue to develop that side of his game, and he's shown that it's important to him and that he's not just somebody. You see a lot of players who really only seem to care when the puck is on their stick in the offensive zone, and I don't think that Barzal's that kind of player at all. He has shown the ability to shadow his man in the neutral zone, to play defense, to back check. So I think that it's an area of his game that's still improving, but something that has gotten better, notably better. And he's actually received accolades from praises from the coaching staff for his ability in those situations. So something for him that is getting much better, and I'm sure will continue to improve as he gets older, stronger, bigger, all those things.
All right, Tim. Well, on behalf of Pete and myself and Isles Nation, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. A little bit later for us than it is for you, so hope it was a little bit more convenient. I really hope that Seattle gets an NHL team in the next decade. Maybe you could scooch over to covering them eventually if that's what you're up for. And we really appreciate hearing all this about Barzal, and we think he's going to be a real great player for us. So thanks for stopping by. And from all of us here, we really appreciate it, and hope you guys enjoyed the podcast.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Thank you very much for having me. And lots of things to be excited about for you guys in regards to Barzal and many other things. And thanks for the well wishes on the hockey team. We're waiting for that one too.
Thank you, Tim. Words can't even express how grateful I am. But that'll wrap it up for us here today. Thank you for listening, and let's go Islanders.